What's happening, folks? Just thought I would do a video on my outlook for the week, just areas I'm paying attention to and potential targets for upside and downside. I'm just going to break it down from the monthly to the 4 hour, maybe touch on the 1 hour. Well, monthly, we're only 2 weeks into the month and it currently is bearish. Last week did print a bearish week, which could be the potential start of some downside in a sense that resistance has formed. Well, second bearish week would confirm that there is a resistance. So what this could be is maybe, since we have sort of broken structure here, this could just be a pullback, resistance forming for further downside, reacting off this mid-range sort of resistance. But again, the monthly still open, so there's every chance this is just a bit of a pullback and then we maybe close bullish. Who knows, there's plenty of days left. But looking at this on the weekly, we have formed a resistance. So, one resistance or one candle doesn't necessarily mean downside. However, I'm sort of open to buying and selling this week from well, when I say that, I'm just talking from a analysis perspective. I can kind of see on the higher time frames where it makes sense to buy from, and where it makes sense to sell from, and that's sort of what I'm just going to go through. But it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to take these positions, these longer term positions that might come outside of my trade time frame and things, or my trade session and things like that. But looking at this on the weekly, we formed a resistance. So looking at this, if I just look at this, right, just this most recent stuff here, I can clearly see how buys make sense, but I can also see how sells make sense. And the reason I see that is because we had this previous structure here. Prices then broke that structure, put in a new low. Prices then pull back, put in a resistance, and we failed to continue. And now we've sort of broken this structure to the upside. But where's price pulled back to? It's pulled back to the previous structure. So you could look at this in two ways, or I'm looking at this in two ways. I'm looking at this as in this could, although we have broken structure here, and you might say, oh, we should be continuing up, this could just be a deeper pullback for further downside, right? Which is possible. This sort of previous week put in a nice resistance candle, closed below the low of the previous week, respected the high, and the week prior to that, what does this candle tell me? It tells me more of some form of rejection than a strong bullish candle. And if I look left, we're at previous support of the previous structure that price just broke out of. So what this could be is the potential start of some downside. Now, if it is, where is that downside likely to go to? Is it limited? And because we've had a previous structure here that we broke out of to the upside, this could either be just a short-term pullback to this previous structure before further upside, which is in line with our higher time frame bias of GJ, or we could just keep continuing down to sort of maybe complete this triangle or this overall bigger triangle if this is just a deeper pullback for further downside. So going into next week, or this week, sorry, of course this resistance down here is going to be a key area to pay attention to for me, because this might be where price pulls back to. And everyone thinks, because if you think about it, if we open here and we start pushing down and we're breaking the low of this and we're breaking the low of this bullish candle and we're thinking it's sell, sell, sells, we've got a nice fat weekly candle, you might think buys make sense, right? But then you take, or sells make sense, then you take a sell and you just get fucked to the upside because we've pulled into a previous structure point just to push to the upside and continue our higher time frame bias. So if I am selling next week prior to this point, that's an area I'm going to be paying attention to if we get there in terms of reaction. I don't necessarily want to be selling at that point because most likely there will be some form of reaction. However, I'll be paying attention to that. So that's one point, this weekly point. So that's sort of just my outlook on the weekly in terms of, it looks like buys, in terms of this could just be a pullback for upside, but it also looks like sales in terms of a pullback to a previous structure point. is this just going to continue down and ignore this? I don't know. So if I go to the daily gives me a bit more information. We're very much bullish, right? We've had this previous structure point that we just spoke on the weekly. We've broke that to the upside. We've held structure within, we've then pushed out, we've then held structure above, and now we're coming back to that point. So if I look at price on the daily and I say, where does it make sense to sell from? In my opinion, sales make sense below 161,177. And the reason for that is because, in my opinion, that is the change of structure back to the downside on this time frame. When we formed support here on this Friday the 17th of February, we had this high here, we had this pullback, and this support of this second daily candle, which confirms the support. The low of this candle is basically what's holding price up. This is the low that's keeping price up to the upside. So if I think about selling and I break back below this point and we hold structure below, what's that going to look like on the weekly, on the daily? You know, that's going to look nice in terms of that candle, right? Also, below this point is below the previous structure highs. So that means that if we close below and hold structure below and continue, we're going to be basically trading back into the previous structure that we were trading in before. So if I talk about ranges and zones, if we can close below here and hold below, then there's no reason why I can't look to target 161,500 as my first target point. If we break that, where's the next support? Down at 158. So like my higher time frame like targetability for sales is going to be 158. And if I just look at this on the weekly, what is that again? That structure point on the daily, is 161, 160. So if I look at that on the weekly, 161, 160 is basically here, right? So we're breaking that low, right? So I might think, well, boom, happy days, sales make sense. Or people might think, right, we're breaking this, sales make sense. But just below that, we've got this weekly resistance. So this is where I feel like sales could make sense, or people might think sales make sense on that time frame, only to find that resistance is below. So what that then tells me is, well, I would like to be trading below the resistance. So you could then in essence say, well, sales make sense below this. So that gives me a bit of room in terms of if we break below here and we maybe come into this area, which is where the weekly resistance is, and we maybe form support and we push up, price maybe fails to continue and we start to put in lower resistances, then I know that that area is being respected and that we're remaining within this zone. Likely we can roll over and continue downside. So that's my sort of thought process on that, and it does get quite clearer on the 4 hour. So we can clearly see that this candle here, this daily candle which formed the support, confirmed the support, below that on the 4 hours, this little structure here. So this support is basically where price pulled back into, and then we continued up. So this is where it makes sense, in my opinion, for a change in structure to the downside. So if we can close below that, hold structure below, this is the first target point. Then obviously second target point down here. If we break that, we're going down into 158. So from a structure perspective, and if we break this zone, where's it likely to go to next? Up here or down here? Makes a lot of sense. Obviously within, you know, these areas there will be daily resistance, 1 hour supports, you know, weekly resistance and things like that, which would be silly to just trade into. But that's sort of what I'm thinking of on that basis. So if I just bring on my The things I've been paying attention to here, obviously got this daily support zone that we broke out of. We then traded into and we rejected, and now we're pushing down. And then of course this weekly resistance zone that we were in for a while, and we've sort of held structure above. We're still holding structure above there, so technically you could say, well, it doesn't really make sense to sell until you're below this weekly resistance to look to test into here. So I've got 2 green rays, 2 red rays. This is just the markup of an area where I believe sales make sense. So if I look at this on the 4-hour time frame, looking at buys, these orange zones are just my 4-hour structure points and areas to pay attention to on that time frame. So for me, we can clearly see that we had this structure. Sales on Tuesday below here made a lot of sense to test into here, which played out. We have then broke, put in a new target. So if price is, pulling back, where's the areas of interest? Well, first and foremost is this 4-hour support zone, and then of course the one we just broke out of, which is just above. And then price, put in that triangle to the downside. So in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to sell in here. So I have a little X marked where this is just going to be my no trade zone, and essentially it's just basically going to be between here and here, and it's like 23 pips, so it's not even a lot. And the reason I don't want to be trading in here is because I'm trading at a previous resistance, which was a previous support, and it's just not really clean. If I'm looking at zones, similar to how Friday played out, we were able to close above the zone and then hold support above this 4-hour structure support. Then we tested the top of the range, right? So the exact same thing. This is where I want to be looking to buy next week. And if I just go to the 1-hour, we can clearly see what happened on Friday. We closed above, pulled down, rejected, held support within the zone, tested the top of the range. So I want to be buying from the exact same point. And if I just look at my ray, my alert, buys above 163.074, I would prefer to see price close and remain above the 4-hour support zone, like how it did on Friday. This is also the change of structure on the 1-hour and the 30-minute to the upside. So if I look at the 1-hour, this is obviously the structure point. Look at it on 30 minutes, a bit clear. This is the most recent resistance. So if I'm buying anywhere in here, there is the possibility for price to come up to that point and reject, or reject anywhere in there because it's a resistance zone. So I want to be buying above that and away from it. So that's my first buy, or my first area of interest for buys. Targetability, of course, you could target the top of the zone. You could then target the most recent structure, which is going to be up here. Or if you're looking to play higher time frame plays, you'd be looking to play up to 166. My second buy opportunity is going to be above all this shit, all this noise, and it's going to be above these highs. In my opinion, you could look to trade above here, but you're only 25 to 30 pips away from this sort of resistance zone, which is, you could really say it's holding price below it, so if we get above it, it should be continuation. So I don't want to be, having structure in here and buying, and then coming into that area maybe having the rejection. I would prefer to either see structure within, get a nice close above, take buys, or the structure above to buy. So that's my second point for buys. Of course, depending on where I come in the session, will depend where, we'll see where price is. But if I'm just looking at this, from what I can see, this is where I want to buy from, and then I want to be buying from above here. From a seller's perspective, I've got 2 areas where I want to be selling from. First is going to be below here. Now if I just open this up, risky sells below 161.952. There's 30 pips of potential downside to the next support. The reason these sells are risky is because I would be selling at support on higher time frames. But the way I'm looking at this is, if we open bullish per se, and we start to break down, if we fail to continue to the upside, this could be the start of the downside, which could potentially lead to as far as 158, which I spoke on previous. The sort of thought process behind that is, well, if we open up bullish, right, and we start to come into these previous structure points and we fail, and we start to come down, this is going to be the change in structure area, because this is where we done this. So if we can get below that, this is where potentially the downside could start, in a sense of continuation beyond this point. Because if we pull up here and the downside starts here, we still could come down to this previous support and still do that, because we're above areas which are holding price up to the upside. So that could still be a possibility. So in my opinion, this on the 1 hour, it's a little bit clear. If I just bring this into the middle here, yeah, so this sort of support structure here is what's holding price up. If we can get below this, this could be the potential start of downside. Whether we just honk to the downside, whether we hold structure below, I don't know. Whether we come into this previous support and then fuck off to the upside, I don't know. But the reason I say these are risky is because I had the exact same sell on Friday, and I traded it down to here, and then we sort of got this strong reaction. So the same thing could happen. We could come below here, and then we could do that. But another way to look at it too as well is maybe all this upside was required to give us enough downside momentum. You know, maybe that could have been the initial pullback for further downside. So this point is going to offer sales the same as Friday, same area, sorry, to potentially test into here. And then if we get continuation, this is going to be the next structure point on the 4 hour. So if we get below here, I'm going to be looking to trade it to here. If we break this point, the next structure point is here. If we break that, the next structure point's here. And then of course, if we break that, we're going down in the 158 area. And that sort of brings me to my second area to sell from, which is the area on the 4 hour, which is basically holding price up to the upside. So I know risky sells are in here, but this is going to be clear sells for me, because if we can break this, this is a structure point holding everything up in the 4 hour. Longer term sells down to 158. If we break that, next structure point down here is 160.52. And then of course below that is 158 in terms of, well, you've got structure here and then downside, but just in terms of like a higher time frame outlook, especially looking at it on the daily and on the weekly, we start to break these points, we're going to be below this previous resistance, further downside. But then again as well, you've sort of got your weekly resistance in here, which is going to be pivotal, sorry. And then you might have some other higher, areas and things like that, and to pay attention to. So I know I said this is going to be a quick video. I thought it was going to be, but that's sort of my areas I'm paying attention to for upside and downside, based on structure, based on zones, and how I'll be looking to tackle next week.